Hey everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan. I'm back here in the studio in Los Angeles. Thank you to everybody who hung out with me via the radio version of the show that I did last week. The ransom has been paid, so I was extricated from the temporary studio I set up in the closet of my bedroom at my mom's house in Arkansas, but it was great to see her, to get that trip done and to get some family time. We are back to business as usual, even though there really is no business as usual, nor has there been at the box office for many months now. The secondary thing here really is what happened at the box office this past weekend. The thing that we're going to be breaking down today is the potentially landmark deal that was announced last week between AMC and Universal. It has the potential to really reshape the face of the theatrical exhibition business. We're going to break that down, what the ramifications might be. But before we do that, we've been on a really bad run lately. It seems like people that are really giants, legends, or just familiar faces in the world of entertainment and really in the world in general have been passing away. And so there were a couple that I wanted to acknowledge today before we get started. The first person is a face that people of many generations were used to seeing on the movie screens and on their television screens, and that is the veteran actor Wilford Brimley. Wilford Brimley had such a varied career, so many different kinds of movies. You may recognize him from Cocoon. You may recognize him from John Carpenter's The Thing. You may recognize him from Hard Target, where he's running away in slow motion riding a horse from an explosion. That was a badass shot I didn't know existed until a couple days ago. Or you may recognize him from TV shows, commercials, memes. Wilford Brimley is somebody who hung out with Ewoks and acted with John Wayne, a legendary actor who passed away just a couple days ago. So I wanted to acknowledge that. What a varied career. How many amazing different genres he got a chance to do. And speaking of different genres, there is a name and a face that may not be as familiar, but who really was a master painter in the world of cinema, and that is director Sir Alan Parker, who passed away as well this past week. He set out as a mission to direct things in every genre, and he certainly did. He directed the film Midnight Express, for which he got an Academy Award nomination for Best Director. He directed Mississippi Burning, for which he also received an Academy Award nomination for Best Director. He directed musicals like Fame and Evita. He directed films like The Commitments, Pink Floyd's The Wall. He said it, like I said, he stated as a goal to cover every genre, and when you look at his filmography, he pretty much accomplished that goal. One thing about Alan Parker that I found as I was doing some research in preparation for the show was that when he wanted to join the Directors Guild of America, you need sponsors. You need people to back up your nomination and your application for membership, and so he got signatures from three directors that he thought would back his entry, and those three directors were Francis Ford Coppola, John Schlesinger, and Stanley Kubrick. Not bad. Not bad backup if you're looking to join the DGA. Of course, his application was accepted. It's hard not to accept it with people backing you like that. The only silver lining to this is that they leave behind a legacy of films and television work that you can look back on and that generations can look back on forever. So, moving from that, let's go to the box office this weekend. And for the second week in a row, Dave Franco's directorial debut, The Rental, stays at the number one spot, bringing in just over $300,000. The Goonies, Jurassic Park, and Back to the Future take up the 2, 3, and 4 spots. Those spots have been taken up for a large part of this summer by library titles. That remains the case. And then another 2020 film, The Big Ugly, coming in at number 5. That actually just edged out John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John's Grease. So if you wonder what's been going on with Vinnie Jones for the last little bit, The Big Ugly. That's your answer. The Big Ugly. So, as I mentioned, the box office is really kind of beside the point, which is kind of funny on a show that's ostensibly about the box office, but this does have huge ramifications on the movie industry, including box office numbers, so I wanted to break this down quite a bit here today. AMC and Universal, who started a feud back when all of this began with the pandemic, when Universal decided to put Trolls World Tour on premium video on demand in addition to opening in a select number of theaters. But there is this kind of agreement, or has been, between theaters and studios that theaters will play movies, that they'll get about 3 months to do so, and then studios can put it out for people to watch at home. That looks to be going away, at least when it comes to AMC and Universal. So let's break down what happened with this deal. After AMC put a ban on showing Universal films following the release of Trolls World Tour, the two apparently went to the table and hammered out this deal, which is a substantial change in how business is done between a theater and a studio. So AMC has agreed to play Universal movies as well as movies from Focus Features, which is owned by Universal and Comcast. They have agreed that they will play those films in its theaters following AMC's ban due to Trolls World Tour and the decision to put it on premium video on demand. Now, this is ostensibly good for Universal because AMC is the largest theater chain here in the United States. And so what we're really seeing is a unilateral agreement between one studio and the largest chain here in the United States in North America. And the thing to note here is that there is no deal like this in place between Universal and any other theater chains at the moment, and there is no deal in place currently between any other studio and any of the other theater chains. This is an express deal between one theater chain, AMC, a very big one, and one studio, Universal. So Universal gets to play their films in AMC theaters. After 17 days, AMC has agreed that Universal can make those titles available on premium video on demand. Now, that doesn't mean that you can buy them, and it's not like a $6.99 rental. These are probably closer to the $20 rental windows that we've seen with Scoob, with Trolls World Tour, with these studio films that have been made available on demand, day and date, or skipping theaters altogether. Universal has agreed that for 3 months, they will not offer their films for sale or at a lower cost rental. Now, here's the reason that AMC has agreed to this deal. AMC will get an undisclosed percentage of the premium video on demand revenue that Universal receives. And this is the rub. This is why AMC has jumped on to this deal so quickly when it really is the opposite of everything that they had stated. And remember, their problem with Universal was that they were afraid that by offering films available at premium on demand, either at the same time it was put out in a theater or shortly thereafter, that it would kill the theatrical exhibition model. Here, AMC has cut a deal where they believe they can make up that lack of revenue by getting a slice of the premium video on demand revenue. Keep in mind, though, this is one chain and one studio. The other theater chains here in the United States, and certainly not the independent theater chains, they have no such deal. So if the theatrical distribution business is hurt by this, if people decide to watch these films premium video on demand, AMC gets a kickback from that money, but none of the other chains do, and none of the other theaters do. So really, there's one way of looking at it by saying that AMC really undercut every other theater chain here in the United States because they made a sweetheart deal with the studio. Maybe Universal's going to make the same deal with other theater chains. Maybe they won't. Same with other studios. Are they now obligated to make these deals with AMC and with other studio chains? Maybe so. This is one of the great ironies of this situation. This whole thing was kicked off because AMC was very upset that Universal made a unilateral move without talking to anyone in making Trolls World Tour available on demand. And they themselves engaged in a deal that was a unilateral deal without talking to anybody else involved in their business or industry to essentially try to keep themselves afloat. The metaphor that I used is the biggest dinosaur just jumped onto the meteor that was heading to wipe out Earth in the hopes of surviving. This could also set off a chain of events where other chains now won't play Universal films. We're going to talk about one of them here in a second because they're now not respecting the theatrical window. So this is a real daisy chain of events. This is what AMC's CEO had to say about the deal. Quote, AMC enthusiastically embraces this new industry model they did not a few months ago, both because we are participating in the entirety of the economics of the new structure, aka we like it now because we get paid, and because premium video on demand creates the added potential for increased movie studio profitability, which should in turn lead to the green lighting of more theatrical movies. So basically AMC saying, hey, we like this model now because we get money, and we think that maybe if more money is made by movies, then maybe they'll greenlight more movies to show in theaters. That seems like a justification to me. In case you can't tell, back when this whole thing bubbled up, I thought that AMC was not in a power position. I thought they were actually pretty stupid to issue this ban on Universal because Universal had just had some success with Trolls World Tour with a distribution model that cut the theatrical system out of it entirely. I think what AMC has done is taken a position of weakness and turned it into, it seems like a position of strength by cutting this deal. Is it a good deal? We're going to look at that here in a second. But really the other thing we have to wonder about is these other theater chains. Now, what are they going to do? There was a quote, this is one of my favorite quotes, from Cineworld, who owns Regal, which is the nation's second biggest theater chain, who said, quote, "We do not see any business sense in this model." So that seems like a no. That seems like a no from Cineworld. But now what happens? Because Cineworld and Regal have said, and other theater chains have said, that they will only continue to show movies from studios who they believe are respecting the theatrical window. Universal now, with this deal with AMC, is stating that they are planning on doing some releases that do not adhere to the guidelines, meaning the 3-month window, that other chains would say would respect that model. So does that mean that if a Universal film chooses, and that's the key thing, it's not every Universal movie, Universal gets to decide after 17 days which movies they want to make premium video on demand, does that mean that the other chains will not show those films or will stop showing them? This opens such a can of worms, and nobody really knows how this is going to work. So let's dig into the numbers a little bit and see just what kind of money we're looking at. So the first thing I wanted to look at was Universal. When we're talking about 17 days, we're talking about a 17-day window of exclusivity here where Universal films will be in theaters for 17 days, guaranteed, before it goes to premium video on demand. How much of a movie's gross is made in those first 17 days? Well, I went back to last year, 2019. Obviously, this year is useless when you're looking at numbers like this. So I went back to last year and just to see how that worked. And there are actually two different models, and it's a question for how they're going to choose to apply this, because 1917, which was a big front runner at the Oscars this year, was up for a lot of Academy Awards, opened in limited release, and then opened in wide release. It obviously had a lot of success after it opened in wide release, after the beginning of the year, than it did if it had gone to premium video on demand 17 days after it opened in limited release. Who knows which way Universal would have gone with it? It was a big budget movie. Maybe they would have said, we're not putting it on video on demand after 17 days, at least not after 17 days of limited release. So we have two different scenarios here. The first one is the breakdown for Universal's domestic earnings. The column on your left there, that's if they had not given 1917 a wide release. So there they have $1.4 billion in total domestic revenue. $992 million of that was done in the first 17 days. And then $417 million of that is done in the theatrical run after 17 days. So it cannot be denied that the lion's share of the movie revenues for Universal Pictures were done in the first 17 days. We know this about most movies. They're front-loaded. They make most of their money in the first few weekends. So this isn't a huge shock. Then if you look on the right, this is if they had put 1917 into wide release and then counting 17 days after the wide release date. Then even more so, $1,081 from that $1.4 billion would have come in the first 17 days with $329 million. So that gulf grows even faster. So are we looking at taking a majority of a film's money out of the theatrical marketplace if Universal puts a movie onto premium video on demand after 17 days? The answer is no, because traditionally, the movies are front-loaded and they make most of their money in the first 17 days. Now, there are intangibles that you have to ask. For example, if somebody knows that they can see a film 17 days after it comes out, will they go to the theater? Would you see that overall gross go lower because people are waiting 17 days to watch it at home? We don't know the answer to that. The other thing that we don't know is Universal going to announce beforehand that this movie is going to be made available 17 days after release, or are you going to have to wait and see? Will Universal wait and see what the box office performance is? For example, a movie like Cats, which they had certainly hoped would do a lot of box office, but did not at all. Would they have called an audible and said, we were going to have a long run on Cats and do the full theatrical window, but it's very obvious that that's not going to happen. Let's just kind of try to grasp onto whatever notoriety it has. People are talking about how bad it was. Let's let people watch it at home. Let's make it available for premium video on demand after 17 days. Can they do that? Will they do that? We don't know. That's one of the things that we don't know yet. Now, I mentioned that it's not just Universal Pictures, but also Focus Features that is doing the 17-day window because they're opened by Comcast. Comcast. They're owned by Comcast. So those numbers break down about the same. This was 2019's releases for Focus Features. They did $181 million domestic total last year. Mostly smaller movies, a lot of movies that you see up for Academy Awards. 133 million of that was done in the first 17 days. 47 million of that was done after 17 days, even though that they don't have release models generally that are done starting in wide release. A lot of that revenue was the Downton Abbey movie. About half of its domestic revenue is the Downton Abbey movie. So even with these smaller films, with their different release structures, you still don't have a lion's share of revenue coming in after 17 days. So you could look at this deal and say, well, it looks like theaters are still going to get most of the revenue that they would anyway, and why wouldn't AMC take this deal if they can maybe also get a piece of the back end? I'm sure that's probably what AMC was thinking. But something else that you have to wonder about is studios don't always make the right call with movies. And so could we see a case where Universal makes the wrong call with a movie and gives up a huge chunk of money and costs a theater chain, not just AMC, but any theater chain that would have shown this film, a huge chunk of money if they pull it out of the marketplace too early? I wanted to look at some films that didn't open great and actually took some time to make money, but if they pulled out after 17 days, you would lose a lot of theatrical revenue. So these are just a few of the films I wanted to look at. There you have The Greatest Showman. It only made $67 million in its first 17 days, but ended up making over $100 million more than that. That was a movie that caught on in January at the box office after it had been really kind of negatively reviewed by critics. If they had pulled that out of theaters after 17 days, that's not a Universal film, but if the studio had pulled that out of theaters after 17 days, you would have been looking at giving up over $100 million in potential theatrical revenue. Maybe you make that up with premium video on demand. Maybe you don't. $20 is a pretty hefty a price to rent a movie at home. Some people may pay it, some people may not. Then you have Green Book, which won the Academy Award. That is a Universal film. It made $14 million in its first 17 days, would go on to make $85 million. That's another film that when it expanded wide, and even when it went to limited release, it didn't do the numbers that a lot of people thought it would. It was a word-of-mouth hit. So that's the kind of mid-budget movie that a lot of people are saying could be eligible and could be a target for this distribution model for Universal to pull out after 17 days and put on premium video on demand, because you can maybe make more money back that way. They're probably not going to do it with Jurassic World because you need a lot of money. And right now, the theatrical model, I think, for a movie like that is probably going to give you the best shot at making that money back. But Green Book, you see here, they could have been missing out on about $70 million of theatrical revenue if they pulled that out after 17 days. Look at Silver Linings Playbook, $10.7 million in its first 17 days, ended up making $132 million. Again, this is a movie that was a platform release in the sense that it started out small. It expanded over many numbers of weeks. But if we get into this distribution model, is that a movie that a studio might say like, well, it's an awards movie. We want people to be able to watch it at home. So we're going to open it small, but maybe we don't expand wide. You could be looking at a lot of loss that way, because look, $122 million of revenue that was done after the first 17 days. And then a movie like Lady Bird, which seems, again, like another movie that you would see on demand right now. If Lady Bird hadn't come out, I could see this being a movie that we talk about having come out on iTunes, or that a studio has put out straight to PVOD. It did $4.6 million as it grew in its first 17 days, ultimately made almost $50 million. So $40 plus million of theatrical revenue done after its first 17 days. Would a studio have pulled that out and not put it into as wide of a theatrical release if they have this PVOD option? These are the questions we have to ask. So breaking down this deal, I don't think that it was a particularly savvy deal, in my opinion, for AMC, because number one, it's a multi-year deal, but we don't know for how long. We don't know the terms of the contract, how much money they're getting from premium video on demand. Something to keep in mind is that theaters, traditionally, the way that they broker deals with studios, the longer a movie plays, the more of the revenue goes to the theater. the most revenue goes to the studio at the beginning of a film's run. So generally, the first couple of weeks, AMC is getting the least amount of money from a studio release. The later part of the theatrical run is when you get 50 or 60 or percent more of the gross going straight to the theater chain. So they could potentially be giving up what was for them their most lucrative portion of the theatrical release. And I have to guess that they're hoping that they make up that by whatever percentage of the premium video on demand model you're going to get. How many people are going to use it? You have to think that they're going to bank on the fact that either there's going to be a reticence to go to a theater, or that people are going to like this model and not go to see it at a theater and watch it at home instead, but we don't know that yet. So this does not seem like a home run financial or strategic move to me from AMC. This kind of seems like a Hail Mary in a way, and it's a Hail Mary that also sort of screws over all of the other theater chains who now are either going to be left out in the cold on this, or kind of feel like they're being coerced into making this deal because now someone else has already made it. And do you want to risk being the chain that doesn't do it? There's so much that has yet to be written here, but on its face, I think that it's a great deal for Universal because they get to do both things that they wanted to. They get to put things out in theaters, and they get to do things on premium video on demand, and they don't have to respect the theatrical window. They don't really take a lot of risk, because if people are going to see their movie, then they get a good chunk of the profit either way. I don't know what percentage AMC is getting on video on demand, but to me this seems like a bit of a desperate move, honestly, on their part. But they are kind of a desperate company. I mean, just today, they finalized a deal that wiped out $500 million worth of debt, brought in $400+ million of liquidity into their company, but they are still going to be drowning in debt, as all of the theatrical exhibition chains are. This, to me, seemed like them pulling the chain. There's an escape hatch there, but the problem is that their escape hatch may drop the bottom out of a lot of other chains, including independent chains, particularly independent chains that play these smaller films that, if other studios follow suit, could now be available at home months earlier than they were. What happens to these smaller chains that book independent films that may not have this long run anymore in theaters? We don't know. So this is a real potential game changer. This could really destabilize the theatrical exhibition model. And I think we're going to be seeing the ramifications of this. We're going to be dealing with the fallout of this for months and probably years to come. It's just another thing when we talk about everything that's happening during this pandemic. I think this is a move that was coming anyway, but what has happened over the last 6 months has really kind of just put the pedal to the metal and really floored the progress of this and the escalation of this. So this is one of the most fascinating stories to come out of the box office for me in a really long time, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the ramifications to the theatrical distribution model. As a fan of the theatrical experience, I can't say I'm very thrilled about this. And I know a lot of people say, like, who cares? Who cares about the theatrical experience? Well, some people care. I care because I think that it is. I think it's one of the most unique experiences that you can have. I just love that way of watching a movie, and I don't want to see something that takes that away. So I know it can be kind of a drag sometimes. That's why I say theaters really have to step it up. They have to step up making sure that rules are followed, because you want people to enjoy the product that you're giving them. But this is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. This has the chance to be a real destabilizing effort on that, and I do think that if it does destabilize this industry, and if it turns into the fact that a lot of the independent chains can't stick around anymore because they can't work out on these terms of the deal, they can't scrape together a profit, and the big guys survive because they're always looking out for each other, and theatrical exhibition mainly becomes about the big blockbuster movies, and all the indie stuff goes to video on demand or whatever theaters are open that could still play them. I don't like that, because I want to see Call Me by Your Name in a theater. I want to see Lady Bird in a theater. I want to see Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri in a theater. I want to see Moonlight in a theater. I don't want to watch those at home because those are all such cinematic films, and I want to see them the way that they're made to be seen. So We will see the full ramifications of this. It is just now becoming clear, but I think I've talked on this for about 20 minutes, so I should probably move on. As you can tell, I'm a little fascinated by this, but let's move on to what people are watching at home, which they may be watching a lot more at home if AMC and Universal have their way. And let's start, as always, with Amazon. The top 10 on Amazon right now: Trolls World Tour, Speak of the Devil, there at number 1, followed by The King of Staten Island. Red 2 bubbles up at number 3. I guess people were just in the mood for some kind of elder action there. Then you've got Bad Boys for Life, The Outpost, Game Night there at number 6, John Wick Chapter 3 at number 7, The Gentleman at number 8, The Secret, Dare to Dream, which we'll see on the iTunes charts as well, there at number 9, and Jumanji: The Next Level at number 10. Don't Google elder action, by the way. I don't recommend that. Put the safe search on if you're going to do that. Let's look at what people are watching on iTunes, purchases and rentals, and The Princess Bride, As You Wish, right there at number 1. This is a 4K version, so I think a lot of people are looking to check out the 4K version of an old classic. The Secret, Dare to Dream at number 2. That is an adaptation of the 2006 self-help book, The Secret. So if Katie Holmes, if you want to see Katie Holmes doing self-help, I guess, there you go. The Secret, Dare to Dream. Then we have the Current War Director's Cut. That's a movie that's had a very tumultuous journey. This was an Oscar hopeful at one point. Benedict Cumberbatch playing Thomas Edison. It was in the process of being re-edited by, unfortunately, Harvey Weinstein when everything happened back in 2017. It kind of got lost in the shuffle, and it is now being released as a director's cut. But that's a movie that could have been, that just was the victim of unfortunate circumstance of its time. Then we have The Outpost there at number 4. You Should Have Left, with Kevin Bacon returning there at number 5. The Rental, the number 1 box office film, right there at number 6. Trolls World Tour at 7. Yes, God, Yes, which is the directorial debut of Karen Maine. It stars Natalia Dyer from Stranger Things, a very well-reviewed film, is there at number 8. Then we have Scoob there at number 9, another premium video on demand release from earlier this year. And then Extraordinary at number 10. That's a Will Forte film. It's a 2020 movie, but they were offering it as a 99-cent rental, which is why it bumped up there into the top 10. You see that a lot here on these iTunes charts. Either new movies or mostly older movies that offer 99-cent rentals are oftentimes top 10 movies. So maybe some people checked out Extraordinary that might not have otherwise. And let's look at the top 10 over on Netflix. Rogue Warfare: The Hunt is the number 1 film there. That's a new film for Netflix. I believe the second in a trilogy of Rogue Warfare movies. Then we have The Kissing Booth 2, which was last week's number 1. Animal Crackers, which I've heard has a fascinating story behind it. The Zookeeper there at number 4. Congratulations, Kevin James. This is my favorite title. Latte and the Magic Waterstone is at number 5. It is a German animated film that just made its debut here on Netflix. I love that Netflix just is, they're just picking up whatever, and it just gets thrown whoosh, right into the top 10. That's a Netflix original. It's actually a German animated film there at number 5. Tell me how magic that Waterstone is. I'm curious. Then we have Seriously Single at number 6. That's a film from South Africa that Netflix is distributing. Jurassic Park at number 7. Acts of Violence, a 2018 late career Bruce Willis film, at number 8. The Old Guard at number 9. And Dr. Seuss's The Lorax there at number 10. And as we've been doing lately, I wanted to look at a flashback for when people were actually able to go to theaters. And we're not going back that far, but it was surprising to me just how quickly 6 years goes by. Because let's flash back to 2014 when Guardians of the Galaxy made its debut, a really shocking debut. This was seen as a big risk on the part of Marvel and Marvel Studios. $94 million debut back in 2014. Here's the weird thing. It's just weird how this weird universal synergy works sometimes. Lucy at number 2, starring Scarlett Johansson, who of course is a part of the MCU. And then there at number 3, Get On Up, which stars Chadwick Boseman, who just a couple years later would go on to great success and fame as Black Panther there at number 3. So you really have an MCU 1, 2, and 3 there. And then you got a real-life superhero there at number 4 with Dwayne The Rock Johnson, his version of Hercules back in 2014. And then Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which stars Andy Serkis, another MCU person, there at number 5. Continuing continuing its run back in the summer of 2014. So yeah, 6 years since Guardians of the Galaxy. That's hard to believe. Some other notable films that opened this week in box office history. We've got 1985, Fright Night and Weird Science both opened on the same weekend back in 1985. Two big 80s films. Then in 1993, Robin Hood Men in Tights opened outside the top 5 at number 6. In 2002, Signs opened with $60 million plus on its first weekend. Scared the pants off of me, I'll tell you that much. And then in 2015, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation opened at number 1. Of course, we've had one Mission Impossible movie since then, Mission Impossible Fallout, and they're attempting to get another one filmed at some point. It doesn't really matter, though, because Tom Cruise is ageless. So we got very close to something that we've been discussing the last couple weeks here, which is a countdown singularity. If you haven't been watching the show, we're running 2 countdowns with the question mark because the existence of both these things is still very much in question. One of them is the countdown to new movies, and the other one is the countdown to New Mutants. We almost had a joining of the countdowns because New Mutants is currently scheduled for August 28th. There was, as of last week, one other movie scheduled to open prior to August 28th, and that is the Janelle Monáe film Antebellum, which was scheduled to open August 21st. Antebellum was removed from the theatrical exhibition schedule. They are not going to release Antebellum. The date is TBD. As a matter of fact, this is how the current select movie release schedule it looks right now. So Antebellum almost cleared the way for the New Mutants to be both the countdown to new movies and the countdown to New Mutants, except that the movie that was pulled off the schedule that had Antebellum being the first movie opening in theaters, Unhinged, which from months ago has been determined to be the first movie to be out in theaters, put itself back on the schedule to once again be the first movie back in theaters. It put itself on the schedule for August 21st, which was the date that Antebellum vacated, and so now we have the countdown to new movies. We're at 18 days. Last week, Antebellum replaced Unhinged. This week, Unhinged replaces Antebellum because it is now back on the schedule for August 21st. It is once again staking its claim as the first movie back in theaters. So we are 18 days away, supposedly, from new movies opening in theaters because it is once again Unhinged. This was for a long time. It was Tenet, then it was Unhinged, then it was Antebellum. That means that we are still at 2 separate countdowns. Perhaps we have averted the end of the world here because the countdown to New Mutants stands at 25 days. We're once again under a month away from the alleged release of the New Mutants, 25 days away, 1 week after Unhinged. Right now, the second major release scheduled to open in theaters. We just passed the 1 year mark from the third release date that New Mutants had. We're over 122 days from the last one. We're over 850 days from the original release date for the New Mutants. But we're once again, now I'm not going to get too excited here, folks, because we've been under a month several times now for the New Mutants. And it's like a Charlie Brown situation here. I'm not going to get too hyped up about this, but we certainly do seem to be zeroing in on something. I don't know what, but we are getting close. However, the countdown singularity has been avoided, which, as I mentioned, could have resulted in either the best underdog story in the history of the cinema, really, with the New Mutants triumphantly becoming the first movie to open following this months-long pandemic, or the end of the world. We may never know which one it was. We can only speculate. So speaking of speculation, I've done a lot of it here on this show, and we're running a little bit long. So thank you for sticking through all that Universal AMC talk. I do encourage you, if you're curious about it, to read more about it, because this really could be looked back upon either as a pivotal moment that changed how the movie distribution business was done, or maybe one of the biggest business blunder decisions of all time by AMC if it blows up in their face. We have no way of knowing which way it's going to go right now, but it is very fascinating. So I will continue to keep you updated as new stuff comes out. Please read more, because it really is a fascinating situation. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please be sure to check me out over on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We're getting ready to spool up the movie club for this week, which we're doing Christopher Nolan and the possible anticipation that that Tenet may open next month. We're doing 3 films by Christopher Nolan for Movie Club this month. We're doing Inception, we're doing Interstellar, and we're doing The Prestige. I'm really excited to rewatch those and talk about it with everyone over there, so you can check that out. I'll be doing the movie commentary for our producer patrons soon. We've got a exclusive show that all patrons get to see called Dan Decides. Our monthly Q&A is going to be happening soon. Lots of fun stuff going on over there. And also be sure to check out Instagram. I am back on Instagram doing some movie trivia, doing a lot of stuff. I'm going to be ramping up on a giveaway here pretty soon. Just trying to kind of spread myself out in as many different places as I can. Just to talk to a bunch of folks. I can do whatever I want right now. I'm free as a bird. So I'm over on Instagram doing some fun stuff. But thank you also for watching here, and thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.